Kinky Bedtime Story. I was sitting in the lounge, connecting some audio equipment, when something nudged at my senses. I stopped fiddling with the audio cables and listened carefully with my head cocked to one side, my eyes scanning the room in all directions. I heard the knock again. It was so faint that it was hard to know where it came from. I walked to the door but kept listening in case the direction of the sound had fooled me. I heard it again but louder this time. I opened the door and saw Emma, who was about to plant her knuckles into the face of the door one more time. "Emma?" I questioned. Emma just nodded and didn't say a word, but a slight smile appeared on her face before she let her gaze fall to the floor. When her face lifted again, I took the opportunity to step aside and open the door fully, arms extended outwards to invite her into my flat. I closed the door and watched as Emma made her way towards the comfy leather armchair. She placed the black tube against the side of the chair and unbuttoned her smart black coat, complete with fur-lined top that covered her up to her neck. Her long blonde hair was in a ponytail, and she only had minimal makeup on her lips and eyes. She loosened her belt around her waist and slipped the coat from her shoulders, catching it with both hands before it fell to the floor. Emma turned to me. Her head bowed. She handed the coat to me as well as an envelope that she fished from one of the pockets. As I took the coat, she kept her head bowed toward the floor. I looked at Emma in stunned silence. She looked gorgeous without the coat hiding her body. She was dressed sexily but smart. Her large breasts were almost spilling out of her top, only held in, it seemed, by the tight-fitting shirt. Showing through her top was a revealing black lacy bra that was doing its best to contain them. Her black knee-high skirt revealed her black lace-topped stockings from underneath, which I admit I had noticed as she turned to give me her coat. I wondered whether there would be matching panties or a G-string underneath. There was only one phrase that pushed through my mind at this precise time. Fuck, she's hot. Without taking my eyes off her, I walked backwards to place the coat on one of the hooks behind the door. I noticed how quiet Emma was, so I decided to break the ice. "Would you like a drink?" Emma looked up at me and smiled for the first time.
"Please,"
was all she said, with a slight nod of her head. "What would you like?"
"You decide, sir."
The word sir felt a little too strong a word for me, yet she used the term so easily. "Please take a seat. I'll get you a gin and tonic if that's okay with you." Emma just nodded and turned and searched for a leather armchair behind her. I left Emma in the lounge. I switched on the recording machines and left to make her a drink. In the kitchen, I opened the envelope and read it quietly to myself. He told me about Emma and how she was his sub. There was very little history, but he mentioned the fact that he had helped her prepare for our evening by choosing her clothes and helping her present herself smartly. I had trouble understanding his last sentence. It read, "I have prepared her for you. She's expected to come home to me in a certain state. I hope you understand, John." I didn't know what to make of it at first, and kept reading it over in my head. I pocketed the note and poured the gin and tonic into a large green glass, covering the ice at the bottom, and tossed in a slice of lemon for good measure. I entered the lounge to see Emma sitting upright in a leather chair with her legs crossed. I handed her her drink and sat opposite her.
"Thank you so much, sir,"
she said as she took it from me. "Emma, I have read your master's note to me and would like to know what makes you a sub."
"I have a need to please. I get a lot of pleasure from simply pleasing and pleasuring another, mainly my master. I get such joy in making him happy however I can."
"Is that all there is to it, Emma?"
"No, sir. I am his toy, to use and play with as he needs to."
"A toy? Do you not find this too degrading?"
"Not just a toy. His toy. And then there are the rules that he gives me."
"So, you just play by your master's rules and he does what he wants with you. Is that how it is?"
"No, sir, not quite. I am also comforted when he tells me that I am his. I am comforted by the fact that I can give him the pleasure that he desires and deserves."
"Could you not get these things from an ordinary lover?"
"No, sir, I cannot. I crave and need to be owned. I need my master."
she stated with a shy smile. "Tell me more about your needs. How do you feel when you are with your master?"
"It's a mixture of two things, sir. One is that I feel loved and happy. The second is a craving to please him, however he wants to be pleased, and with whichever part of me he desires."
At this point in the interview, and the matter-of-fact way she related everything to me. I couldn't help but follow the line of her split skirt upwards to the top of her stockings. I could see the floral design on top. I had to ask the obvious question that came to my head. Have you ever not pleased your master?
Yes, there are times when I've really pissed my master off.
I saw a glint in her eye as she looked at me in a demure way. What happens then?
I nervously wait to find out what my punishment will be, but I am equally excited about what it might be. I never feel just one emotion at a time, rather, it's a mix of emotions.
Does your master ever go too far with his punishment?
There is never a too far. Everything I deserve, I will get. My master looks after me like I am one of his most precious things in the world. What more could any submissive want?
I wouldn't be able to answer that question at all, I told her frankly. My thoughts were all over the place. Indeed, Emma put it so succinctly. What more could a submissive want? I looked Emma in the eye. I wanted to try and see whether she got turned on by the next question or whether she felt saddened by it. I wanted to know whether her punishment was something she got but didn't really want. When your master punishes you, what kind of punishments do you prefer? Emma's eyes seemed to light up. That was before she closed them in the contemplation of her answer. When her eyes opened, she spoke.
Spanking, sir.
You like to get spanked?
I often get punished that way, and I always enjoy it.
How do you get spanked exactly?
Sometimes, sir, it's just a simple over-the-knee hand spanking. Sometimes my master uses something to spank me with.
A wiry smile appeared on her face, and I saw her eyes glance to the side of the chair, the place where the cardboard tube was resting. I could see her breathing increase significantly at the thought that we were now percolating through her mind. Her breast heaved in unison, and I would have to admit to a shivering sensation around my balls as my cock twitched to attention. I dare anyone to look at how she portrayed herself at the point in time and not get aroused. I take it you like being spanked. It was a safe and obvious question to ask. Perhaps a little dumb, given the way she reacted. I didn't know why, but my cock twitched again at that question. At that point in time, Emma looked up at the ceiling and shook her hair. And for the first time that evening, she even looked me in the eye.
Sir, my master knows I enjoy it. But it depends so much on what I'm being punished for as to how hard I get spanked.
Emma's eyes left mine and she glanced down to concentrate on her thighs before continuing.
Sometimes my master spanks me to the point where it hurts to sit down the next day.
Does your master, does he injure you? Emma was quick to reply to my hesitant question.
Sir, I must insist, if I may be so bold, but my master has never injured me. Yes, he does punish me, but there's a big difference. My ass cheeks sting so hard sometimes. I can feel the heat emanate from them, and the glow can sometimes light up the room.
Emma giggled at that.
They can be so red and untouchable at times, but that is the worst my master has ever done to me.
I suddenly realized the humility of her words, the love she had for her master, and the way she held him in high esteem. I just nodded my head, and I was almost lost for words, at least any that could form a coherent sentence. Emma broke the awkward silence.
There's more to punishment than spanking, sir. Don't forget verbal and humiliating punishment.
What form does that take?
Well, sir, there's the calling me names, and making small but hurtful digs at me when I have done something silly. Not that I would do anything silly, of course.
Emma was thoughtful, and I could hear the cogs turning in her head. At that point in time, she projected a playful demeanor.
Then there's times when he makes me go out without a bra on. And I have to admit that I hate him for that because my boobs are so big and it's so obvious to everyone that I'm not wearing a bra.
I just waited for Emma to continue. I could see there was discomfort spreading across her face, and I knew that she was wondering whether to tell me something or not. I just let my silence pull it out of her.
The worst, sir, is the silence.
Emma dropped her head to her chest as she uttered those words. The last word was almost a whisper. What do you mean by the silence?
It's when my master won't talk to me, sir. Sometimes he puts me in a silent room for quite some time.
Emma shook her head.
I'm not fond of silence, sir.
I quickly realized that silence was Emma's most hated punishment. And there I was, keeping quiet while I let her think and speak to me. It was some time before I formed my next question. I have to admit that I started to feel a little uncomfortable at her predicament, how she formulated her sentences, and how vulnerable she felt even in my presence. An hour had already gone by and I was being drawn into this woman's world. A part of me started to understand, and yet there was so much more that I didn't. I was slightly struggling with how to take the interview forward. What sort of questions I asked next? I wasn't sure whether Emma was feeling all that comfortable either. Talking to a relative stranger about how she behaved and what she did, I decided that enough was enough. Well, Emma, I think you provided me with a very thorough insight of what it's like to be you. I guess you're ready to go back to your master. Shall I fetch your coat? Emma shivered slightly. Her lips pursed, and it was obvious that something was bothering her. She wanted to say something important, but her lips wouldn't utter the words. Emma slowly slipped to the floor and knelt before me, eventually looking up into my eyes. I pushed my notebook down into my lap to suppress the twitching between my legs. I waited for something to happen. Emma tilted her head slightly to one side as she pondered her thoughts.
Sir, if I may, I would like to ask you a question.
I nodded to Emma. Of course you can. Go ahead.
Sir, have you ever spanked anyone?
I noticed a little bit of confidence in her demeanor, a little bit of a tease in her voice. As if she already knew the answer, there was a level of expectancy in her eyes. My reply was a little unsure. I guess a playful spank now and then, nothing more than that. I guess I already knew where this conversation was going, and it became more obvious when Emma stood up. Every movement she made was performed in a slow manner. All the while, Emma looked into my eyes, then slowly turned her back to me and stepped towards the chair. Emma knelt on the chair, spreading her legs a little wider to gain stability. Her hands came behind her fingers disappeared under the hem of her short skirt, and I watched as she grasped her G-string and pulled it down so it rested just above her knees. Her hands then took place on the hem of her short skirt. She lifted it upwards towards her waist as she bent forward to rest her head and hands on the back of the chair. Her bottom was beautifully exposed, and the lace stockings contrasted wonderfully with her skin. The black straps of her suspender belt clung onto her stockings for dear life as she stretched them fully. But it wasn't her bottom that caught my attention. Her pussy lips were squeezed tightly between her thighs, forming a perfect oval and shining with moist anticipation. I couldn't help but lick my lips. My notepad was placed to one side as I unreservedly let my cock grow within the confines of my trousers. I knew the interview was over, but the evening wasn't. Emma was patience personified. Staring straight into the back of the chair, she eventually spoke.
May I suggest, sir, that you may like to give it a try?
For a submissive, I thought her words were authoritative yet cautious, if those two words could ever be associated with one another. I stood up. I looked at the curves of her bottom and the taut suspenders. I must admit, I wanted to slip my finger between her pussy lips and let it slide into the silkiness and moistness of her honeypot. But Emma was offering me something different. It would have been easy to spank her bottom if she had been naughty or had done something that annoyed me, but she was pleasant. Gentleness emanated from her very soul. There was also expectancy and excitement. Her moist pussy made that very evident.
Sir, may I suggest about 3 hard spanks to each cheek? Unless sir would like to do more, of course.
If I didn't know any better, I would say Emma was chiding me. I raised my hand and hesitated, dropping it back down to my side. I looked at my open hand and then Emma's bottom. Her placid demeanor stirred something in me. I found my breathing increase, and a smirk appeared on my face. I caught part of Emma's face reflected in a long mirror that spread across the wall of my flat. She too was breathing erratically. Her eyes were closed, waiting, expecting, needing. Every now and then a quick smile would brush over her lips as she let out a short, sharp breath. I watched her mouth fall open, forming a perfect O as my hand came down on her left cheek and then her right. I felt a rush of excitement. I was doing something naughty, something I had not really done before, and this beautiful woman in front of me was urging me on, encouraging me. As she exhaled, I heard Emma issue an instruction. It was a simple, single word.
Harder.
Her words filled me with encouragement, I think for the first time in my life as being to realize the pleasure of this sexual activity. I raised my hand and brought it down on her left cheek and then her right. It was harder this time. I didn't give her any time to adjust to the pain or shock of the contact. I saw her bottom reverberate. Pressure waves flowed outward from the contact with my hand and over her bottom and then down her thighs. Emma sucked in much needed air as she felt my hand spank her. Yet she never cried out once. She surprised me with her next words, issued between much needed breaths.
Harder, sir. Please.
I felt my cock stiffen at her words. I thought I'd spanked her hard enough the second time. Obviously not. Emma was beginning to make me feel inadequate. What did I need to do to make her scream and say stop? When would she have enough? My cock twitched again as I suddenly realized that Emma would not say the words stop, not while she felt pleasured by this. I raised my hand more. I mustered up the hardest spank I could, let my hand fall onto Emma's bottom. This time it was the right cheek followed by the left. Emma let out a surprising gasp as each stroke hit home. I suddenly felt a pain in my hand. It was stinging from the contact with Emma's bottom. I looked at her and noticed my hand mark in plain sight, as red as it could be and surrounded by a mellow red glow that slowly spread across her bottom. I placed my hand close to the handprint on her bottom and felt the heat emanate from her bone. On looking down further, I noticed a dribble of fluid making its way down and across the middle of her thigh. And then I noticed the droplet of liquid elegantly posed at the end of her pussy. My cock was hard as fuck when I noticed the way Emma reacted to my hand. I gave it a quick squeeze and tried to push it down, but it wasn't going anywhere and was in desperate need of relief. Emma moved slightly to one side. I saw her extend her hand to the tube that was placed against the chair earlier. She opened it and retrieved a white stick. She bent forward on the chair and lifted both feet further up into the air. Her calves were almost touching her thighs. She balanced the white stick across her feet. With the white stick cradled in the well of her arched feet, Emma resumed her stare into the back of the chair.
I sensed that you enjoyed that, sir. Why not do the same with his cane?
Emma was looking down to the chair, but I could see a slight blush growing over her cheeks. A smile broke out on her lips, and I looked at the white cane as it was presented so elegantly to me. I wanted to get a camera to capture the image of Emma before me. I heard and felt her breath become calmer as I picked up the cane and fondled it in my hands. I didn't know which end to hold or which end to swipe with. They both looked as thin as the other. I raised the cane and presented it to her bottom, letting her feel the coldness of the wood on her hot bottom. I shook my head from side to side. Somehow this didn't seem right. I confessed to her, "I don't think I can cane you, Emma." In an almost pleading tone, Emma replied,
Sir, please do it. Please cane me. It will make my master so happy when I tell him how obedient I've been.
"What will happen if I don't cane you?"
Sir, master will know when he sees no marks on my ass. He will not be proud of me. He will surely cane me for being disobedient.
I could feel Emma's concern, her uneasiness, her need to please her master was paramount. Yet I felt that caning her would be beyond me. I raised the cane into the air. In the reflection of the mirror, I saw a broad smile break out on Emma's lips. The cane swooshed through the air and I let it fall into the palm of my hand. It hurt like hell, even when I was controlling the strength of it. I saw disappointment spread across Emma's face in reflection. She almost started to sob. I felt sorry for her. Emma regained her composure. She wiggled her bum from side to side, trying to seduce me further. Emma knew I was watching her intently. My cock was still very hard, but I was on the verge of putting the cane down and turning away. Emma's words changed all that.
Sir, please don't let my master punish me with his silence again.
Her words came across as desperate, needy, maybe even a form of emotional blackmail. I looked at her body poised on the edge of my chair. I had made my decision. Her state, her demeanor, her whole body cried out to me. Most of all, it was that smile that I could see developing on her face as she tried her best to hide it from me. Emma cried out loud as the first strike of the cane caught at her bare flesh. She never had time to adjust her expectations to the sound of the swooshing noise through the air as it was pushed around the moving cane. I was too enraptured by her face to notice the effect I had on her bottom. I watched as her smile disappeared, her mouth opened, and a short, sharp intake of air was followed by an audible gasp and squeal. I never hesitated to apply the cane again. The second strike followed quickly. Emma cried out a second time, and again, as the third strike sank into her bottom. I watched as the flesh of her bottom parted to allow this cane to sink deeper, and I was aware of my gritted teeth and sharp, grunting breath. Waves of pressure pushed her flesh outward from the strike. The crack of the cane followed by the hesitant swishing sound as it moved through the air. There was a symmetry about the whole thing. Both cheeks pulsed in synchronous manner. 3 marks left by the cane were evidence for her master, and the constant dripping from her pussy was evidence enough for me. I heard Emma scream louder from the next strike of the cane before I threw it across the floor. I wanted to gather up her leaking fluids on my finger and lick them clean. I wanted to take my cock out and fuck her over the chair. This beautiful woman was so elegantly poised before me, and dripping wet with excitement. Yet she was not mine, and undoubtedly her master would have something to say about it if I took her in that way. Emma must have sensed the caning was over. She rose slightly into the chair before placing her feet on the floor. Her knickers dropped to her ankles as she stood up and twisted her body to face me. She looked me straight in the eye before kneeling down before me. Emma's eyes were level with the bulge of my pants. I couldn't have hid it if I tried. My cock was so hard, so erect. I had never felt hornier than I did at that precise moment. Emma looked straight at my cock. It was hidden as much as it could have been from her sight, yet more than visible to her gaze. A smile crossed Emma's face before her tongue slipped out and was quickly retracted.
Thank you, sir, for spanking and caning me. I would truly like to thank you.
Emma raised her hands to the belt of my trousers.
May I, sir?
I just nodded, allowing Emma to remove my clothes. Very deliberately, Emma undid the belt of my trousers, smiling all the while as her fingers manipulated the leather in the metal clasp. Once undone, she flicked the top button and unzipped my trousers. Emma let them fall a little, and I could see her marvel at the bulge beneath my pants. Emma hooked her thumbs onto both items of clothing and pulled them down past my thigh, letting them fall the rest of the way down the floor. My cock sprang free. Emma smiled. Emma looked up at me to confirm that she could continue. "Has your master told you to pleasure me?" Emma didn't reply. She just nodded affirmatively. "Suck it. Make me come, Emma." Even if I wanted to, which I didn't, I could not have stopped Emma sucking my cock. I so much wanted to lick her pussy too. Maybe I could get that chance later, I thought to myself. Emma licked the head of my cock before moving down the shaft to lick my balls. On her way up, she paused to cut my balls with her hand, while the other pulled my cock so it was level with her mouth. It was the first time I had noticed her subtle pink lipstick, as my cock had disappeared between her lips. Emma moaned a little. I can only guess it was due to the pre-cum that I knew was leaking from the end of my cock. My hand nearly came up around the back of her head as I wanted to thrust my cock into her mouth and down her throat. I wondered if she could do that. I didn't have to wonder too long. I was lost. Completely lost. My cock disappeared from its view. Its length was engulfed in the warmth and wetness while her hands came up on my bum and pulled me into her. Emma sucked on my cock like a pro. I could hear her breathing through her nose as she slipped my cock halfway out, only to sink it back down onto it fully. She stayed for a further minute in that position, twisting her throat and face across my groin in order to caress my cock. Emma's throat muscles were second to none. I had never experienced a blowjob as good as that in my entire life. I could feel my orgasm building. I could feel the need to hold Emma tightly. My hand eventually parked itself on the back of her head as I started to move my cock into her, in a mock thrusting action. In truth, my cock had nowhere to go. It was fully inside her mouth and down her throat. One of Emma's hands left my bum and made its way into her pussy. Her hand probed and pushed against her sex lips as she sucked on my cock. I started to moan. Emma pushed her head off of my cock, releasing it from the confines of her throat, and my hand came away slightly from the back of her head. Emma wrapped her hand around my exposed shaft and started to pull on it. It was only a few seconds later that I realized that it was her pussy juice and saliva that was acting as lubricant on my shaft. Emma continued sucking on my cockhead and continued to taste my leaking pre-cum. That was the trigger. I started to clench my teeth. I was about to spurt. Emma released my cock entirely and started to stroke it from the base to its head. She looked up at me, silently expecting something salty and sticky. Her body rocked into the action of her hand. Emma's tongue teased my tiny hole before her mouth, once more engulfed the head of my cock as she sucked on it. I was too close for comfort, too far gone to even tell her I was about to come. I remember thinking, fuck, she's good. But truth be told, Emma was fucking good from the minute she walked into my flat. From the minute she removed her coat, from the minute the first drop of her juices appeared at the end of her pussy lips. The hand caressing my balls was now squeezing them, as if I needed any encouragement on that score. This was it. Emma was going to get soaked. Emma sucked on the head of my cock one last time as her hand brought itself up along my shaft towards her. My spunk erupted into her waiting mouth. I saw Emma's mouth expand as she accepted my salty cream, and then I saw her swallow it quickly. The next jet was treated the same way. After the third jet forced its way down her throat, I had a good sense to let her know that I was coming. I was breathing erratically and gulping in gallons of air as quickly as I could. Emma withdrew her mouth from the end of my cock and let my remaining spunk fall over her face, all over her white shirt, down between her breasts, and all over her hand as she pulled my cock until it was empty. Emma finally spoke.
Did Sir enjoy that?
I left Emma in no doubt that I enjoyed it. I knew she had too, as the smirk on her face told the whole story. I was looking forward to taking Emma across the sofa, pushing her down into it, spreading her legs, and sucking her wonderfully wet pussy lips. Emma stood up and slowly let my cock fall from her hands.
Sir, I must go. Master will be expecting me.
She politely lowered her head in my direction and stepped out of her knickers, leaving them on the floor next to her heels. Emma's words shocked me. I was stunned at her abruptness, her directness. I wanted more. Of course, I will get your coat. I started to move around her and nearly fell over. How can one forget their trousers were around their ankles after such an amazing blowjob? I quickly gathered them up and dressed myself. I moved to get Emma's coat and a towel so she could tidy up herself a little. As I returned, Emma was waiting by the door. I handed her a towel first.
No, thank you, sir. I shall meet my master as I am.
I looked at Emma. She had stunned me once more. A smile broke over my lips and I nodded, realizing far more about who she was and what we had done than I would ever known from the interview. I held her coat for her as she slipped into the arms and gathered it about her waist. She tied the belt like a knot rather than feeding it through the loops. Emma opened the door latch to let herself out. Before she moved, she leaned in and planted a kiss on my cheek. It made me smile.
Thank you, sir.
Was all Emma said as she walked out of my flat. I didn't know how she was getting home, whether she would walk or phone for a taxi, or whether her master was outside waiting for her. I smiled to myself as the door closed, and I realized that at least her master would be pleased with her. There would be no spanking, no caning, and no silent treatment tonight. I walked back to my notebook and picked it up. I started to write all the events down so I could remember the whole evening from beginning to end, as if I was going to forget. It was then that I noticed the cardboard tube at the side of the chair. I looked behind me and saw the white cane nestled against the boundary of the floor and the wall of my flat. I stood in the exact spot where I'd enjoyed the most wonderful blowjob and looked into the empty mirror. The back of the chair was the only thing staring back at me. Emma was gone. I looked down at the floor. Her G-string formed tiny circles that curled in on themselves. I lifted them to my face and smelt her sweet aroma. On the floor below me was a pool of liquid, in places mixed with my spunk. I dipped my fingers into the clear-looking fluid. What now, I thought. I sucked on my fingers and I tasted Emma for the first time, but not in the way I wanted to. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the slap of my hand, the swish and crack of the cane. I could hear gasps and heavy breathing. I could hear the sounds of domination and submission, all wrapped up in the sound of silence. I swallowed hard and sat in what will be known from now on as Emma's chair.